So what that means for institutions is that the old playbook does not work anymore. You cannot just open your doors and expect students to come. It is extremely competitive. I think that the financial power as well has declined, meaning that it was quite common for families in Asia, in China or in India to to borrow money to send their kids overseas. Speed is super important. Around 70% of students expect a reply within a couple of days, and 2/3 say that the speed to response actually influence which university they choose.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your co-host for today's episode. I'm Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Garigal Land in Sydney.
And g'day, I'm Dirk Mulder, founder and CEO of the Koala News. I'm coming to you from a little bit west of Rob in Durrag country at the foot of the beautiful Blue Mountains.
Dirk, I think we're now obliged to open the episode with a quick check of fuel prices at time of recording. How are things out west?
It's amazing. Mate, it's a really good question. I can't remember the last time I filled up, to be honest. The good news is, if you're a listener of this pod and you've been listening, you would note that the fuel price went up, but then obviously the tax came off. So it dropped a little bit. I want to say I paid $2.16 at the Bowser probably a week ago.
Yeah, I filled up yesterday, my unleaded, my little runaround car, and I was excited to only pay $2.15.
Yeah, there you go.
Excited. I was genuinely frothing.
Yes, mate, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing here in the state of New South Wales, and I'm sure other states have the same thing, but the New South Wales government fuel app, I find myself using that a lot more now than what I probably ever have. Yeah,
it's true. And at a time of recording, we haven't filled up our four-wheel drive in literally 2-3 weeks, because that's at 3:30.
You might need the crankshaft to get it going.
Yeah, but just wind it up. and just to sort of paint the picture of where we are in the world at this time, we're currently at a time when a ceasefire has been announced between Iran and America, but it's holding on tenuously, and pretty much the Americans have just blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. That's kind of where we are in the world right this moment. What are we talking about today, Dirk? We should probably talk about international education. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. We're going to run through a few things that are going on probably more in public policy than anything else. I talk about the R word, and I don't want to put the knocker on it, but recession. There's been quite a few stories written that I've noticed in the last couple of weeks using the R word in the economy. So we'll run through that and have a chat about international ed's role in that. Perception and policy around international ed, or perception versus policy. How the narrative is continually changing. The government's response to the international ed inquiry, which was first started a number of years ago. We might even have a chat a little bit about a great community initiative in the state of Victoria. And we are lucky enough to have Nico Chu from Sinorbis as our guest at the tail end of our program.
You've done well, mate, to get Nico Chu coming in to talk to us later on. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, mate, I'm looking forward to it, actually. I mean, Sinorbis is probably a brand or a name that's kind of synonymous with synonymous, is that the right word? Yeah. Goes with it, international education, and has done for some time. So it's going to be really interesting to get Nico's perspective on, what's been going on and what's happening and what some of the future opportunities are of the sector.
That's coming up a little bit later. But yeah, let's start off on the economy side of things. And interestingly enough, we're heading towards budget time. I'm sure you've been picking that up too, Dirk. So much stuff going about the budget. It seems like the government is sort of positioning itself for a fairly substantial reform agenda. I think the cover of high petrol prices and global disquiet is maybe giving them some opportunity to do some stuff that they probably never dreamed that they'd be able to do. Things like capital gains tax, and there's all sorts of stuff whispering around. But maybe that kind of upcoming budget is interesting context for what you're saying there. Possibility of a recession.
Yeah, I mean, look, mate, I go back, I guess, to my opening comments where I probably have seen more in mainstream media talking about the economy flirting with recession. And obviously, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say recession is negative growth 2 quarters in a row. Is that correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Excellent, I got that right. I was paying attention in Year 12 economics, which is great.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I actually even did 3 in economics too, so I could tell you all about environmental economics, which is amazing. Anyway, so yeah, and so when we start looking at that and we start looking at, obviously the petrol crisis, and we're going to have costs going up, right? Like there's no doubt about
Yeah.
that. We see it at the Bowser now. I think there was an announcement yesterday, the day before, where Uber's now going to put a petrol, I guess, excise or whatever you want to call it on top of surcharge. Thank you, Rob, for Uber trips. Mate, I've seen some predictions about food costs going up, in a really strong way. So when we start looking at all of that, costs are going to continue to rise. I've seen numbers of 20, 30% in some areas of the economy. So when we start talking about that, then we start talking about pressure on the economy, and we're going to see consumption probably tail off, and those price measures I'm going to use another economic word, we'll probably see some elasticity. As the price goes up, we'll have less consumption of those goods. So with all of that in mind, the economy is, for the want of a better word, probably looking at shaky times ahead, which then you look at and say, well, what are the success stories? And, as we've spoken about in the pod in the past, obviously export sectors are really important for that. The price of iron ore at the moment, I think, is fairly steady. But if that comes off, then there's going to be significant pressure. And obviously, as international education is the 4th largest contributor to GDP and 4th largest export sector, and probably the largest that we don't dig up out of the ground, it puts a really interesting scope on what's going on in international ed and whether that can continue to act either as a buffer against recession or as something that's going to drag the economy down further. And so it's a fascinating, I guess, viewpoint. I was contacted by the Nine Radio Network and did a radio interview on Money News last week, and the questions were around that. What happens when the international education sector declines? And it was fascinating. And so what I did was I dusted off some of the, luckily I got a couple of questions ahead of time. I dusted off some of the research that English Australia did before the election last year, which looked at international student spend by electorate. And off the top of my head, the electorate of Sydney, $2.6 billion spend for international students. Melbourne, 2.1. I want to say McNamara, which runs around the bay in Melbourne, was about 700 mil. So, you take off 10%, which is probably where we're heading for the retraction of international students. We're talking about $260 million being taken out of
a local
just the electorate
area
of Sydney.
Holy smokes, man.
Consumption.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Then you talk about another 210 million out of Melbourne. You talk about 70 million out of McNamara around the bay in Melbourne. And then, you go down to the tail end of that and you look at economies like the city of Armidale in New South Wales, which, I haven't got the stats in front of me, but, if you think about international spend, you draw that back and you're probably still talking in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions dollars, just in a local economy. And, we had Ian Pratt on the other day talking about this exact issue around the Sunshine Coast and around Noosa. Then you add on to that, the lack of human resource that's available for small businesses and being able to serve patrons in coffee shops or whatever it might be. And we're starting to paint a picture now where I think it was the NAB 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, spoke about the 0.8 percentage points contributed by international education to the economy was enough to buffer the sector to keep it out of recession. So again, with a contracting international education sector, with everything else that's going on in the economy, you got to ask the question, what's the economics of all of this and how's it going to play out, particularly if those drivers keep going in other parts of the economy.
So interesting. I mean, I remember the statistics, when they're talking about GDP growth, and there's been a number of times recently where it's only the growth due to migration, of which international education, of course, is a part, that's kept the Australian economy out of the toilet. Sorry, not out of the toilet, but out of going backwards on numerous occasions in recent years. But what you just said there, bringing that to an electorate level, a local government area level, that's the first time I've actually thought about that. And that is extraordinary. I mean, like City of Sydney, $200 million taken out of those local businesses, the coffee shops, the cafes, the accommodation, the fill in the blank. Like, that is an enormous whack to any economy. That's real.
Mate, I agree. And, again, hats off to Ian Aird and the guys at English Australia who did this research. It's phenomenal research. It was put out just prior to the election last year, hoping to I guess, have the discussion that we're having now. It probably didn't splash as hard as what I was expecting it to, but I think it's really good research and maybe worthwhile updating as well as we start hitting those ripples of economic effects.
Let's move on to perception and policy. I'll let you run into this. This is some interesting thoughts that you've got here on our run sheet, man. I might let you take this away.
Yeah, mate. So I probably I'll say I wrote this over the Easter weekend, and I got to say it's nice to have 4 days where you can actually kind of sit down and put some really good time into reflecting, researching, and doing some different things around ideas that you see. You can feel, you can't necessarily touch them, but you got a really good gut sense of it. What I've noticed, and if I cast your mind back to the childcare debates, it was a massive thing around childcare and around childcare's, for the want of a better word, loss of social license. There was, real concerns around that. And one of the things at the time that I think we spoke about was just how particularly, and I don't want to, kind of tar and feather the ABC on this, but just how much the ABC ran with that. And it was almost a formula, right? There was a Four Corners episode, and then it was followed up with almost daily pieces that compounded that. And it went for about a week or 2 weeks, the childcare stuff. And again, the childcare stuff was probably a lot longer, but the ABC definitely gave it a really good hammering for a while. And you cast your mind back probably 2 weeks ago, there was that Four Corners report on on particularly university education.
Yeah.
They looked at consultants, they looked at spend, they looked at UTS, ANU, Wollongong, around how governance was failing and blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, 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 because they are real issues.
Yeah, there's some real issues there, for sure. You're not being flippant with it. No, I get it.
It felt like it was I don't want to say a hit piece, but it could have been done in different ways. And so in the following days post that story, every time I woke up in the morning, I don't know about you, but I get, a whole bunch of notifications on my phone, ABC, this, that, whatever. It just seemed like the same kind of thing happening. There was a story after a story after a story. And so what I did was there was one particular story that the ABC ran, I think it's called The Long Road or something along those lines, The Long Story or something along those lines. And very similarly, I read it and I just went, you know what? I don't want to sound dumb, but I actually know a little bit about this, and I'm going to actually dig into some of these things and see what we come up with. So one of the things that I looked at was looking at what is the narrative compared to what we know in the data. And there was quite a divergence in what I found. So the way that I started off the story on the Koala was there's a particular kind of policy moment that Australia has entered into on international education. It's not defined by data, it's not defined by demand, and it's not being driven by the sudden collapse in quality or reputation. It's being defined by a narrative. And I think that probably sums up exactly what the deal is. So when we talk about loss of social license, and I have this conversation with, people out in the sector all the time, who are the ones that are saying that we've lost our social license? It seems to be more than ever just the government.
Just politicians,
and politicians. So it's not the sector saying that, we've lost it. And I don't think that's because the sector is, so full of itself that it pretends everything's fine. I think the people that I talk to say that there are issues in the sector. But it's not a sledgehammer. It's how do we weed out the bad operators? It's how do we correct the little things that are going wrong? So, for instance, and in the story, I gave 10 points, but I might just read off a couple of them. So, the claim of falling satisfaction does not match national data. So, the suggestion that student satisfaction is in decline is not at all supported by Quilt Student Experience Survey. No. Recent data places satisfaction around 76%, a clear rebound from the pandemic lows. International student satisfaction has similarly recovered to the mid-70s, recovered into the mid-70s, while the International Student Experience Survey shows approximately 94% of students reporting a positive living experience in Australia.
Yeah.
This is not a deterioration, it's a recovery from COVID. Yet the narrative of falling satisfaction persists because isolated experiences, which are quoted in stories like the ABC, and the pandemic era data points to being elevated above the broader trend. And again, it's one of those things that I've said it all along, and it's one of the reasons that I started the Koala was when you, and I'm not pointing the finger at any particular journalists, but when you get journalists who are across the gamut and don't understand potentially the difference between an offer letter and a confirmation of enrolment, these are the things that get missed, and they're really important to understand in our sector.
Can I pull one of these out, mate?
Another
Like I'm
one-
just looking through this. Like the cash cow
Yeah, of course.
narrative ignores teaching quality data. Can you talk to this
Yeah.
point? This is great. Like I love it.
Yeah. So look, I mean,
And mate, sorry, just before you go on that, I completely agree with you. I don't think we've got a social license issue. I think we've got a storytelling issue in Australian higher education.
Yeah.
People have heard me say that before. And this is a great example. This
yeah.
one.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I guess the cash cow narrative essentially means that people being pushed through, and there's lowering experience, and all the teaching quality that goes with that is lowering because we've got lower standards because we're bringing these international students, and like that's the narrative, all right. That you sit in a lecture theatre with students and they're just being passed because they're paying, and it's not reflected in any data. So what I've written in the story is few narratives have been as persistent or as politically potent as the idea that international students are treated as cash cows. It is also one of the least substantiated by data. Quilt consistently reports teaching quality satisfaction at or above 80% in many institutions, alongside strong graduate outcomes. The structural reality is that universities have diversified revenue to funding constraints. And we know that, right? We saw George Williams on the Four Corners report saying that 10 years ago, 80% were funded 80% by the government purse. That's now down to about 40%. So I mean, it's plain for all to see. But there's no evidence that this is translated into systemic declines in educational quality. The narrative endures, not because it's proven, but because it's simple, emotive, and very easy to communicate. So the cash cow thing, again, it's just one of those things that I think, Joe Public standing at the bus stop is very happy to talk about how the erosion of universities. The other one that really gets me is, that standards are dropping in our universities, and our universities are going to hell and high water and blah, blah, blah. Mate, I don't think our universities have ever been better globally ranked than what they are probably now. And if anything, we're remaining consistent. But again, I think it was Alan Olsen that did some research and compares the ability for an Australian student to attend a top 100 university, and the ability in Australia is so much a higher proportion than, say, in the US or the UK because of the scale of the system.
Yeah.
And so I think there's got to be an honest conversation that we have here is, if universities are not going to be funded the way they are currently, so if alternate revenue streams to prop up that 40% are going to be slowed down, cut off, whatever, what's going to give? And to me, it has to be institutional rankings. So we can't expect to have our universities be in the top 100 anymore. We can't expect that I'm pulling this out of my backside at the moment, but the average university in Australia to be ranked in the top 200 or top 250 or top 300 in the world, they're going to go down to 400, 500. So when we talk about quality, to me, that's a really interesting quality indicator. And it may not be in the teaching and learning space specifically, but it's about reputation. It's about where are you actually studying and where do they rank globally against peers. So I think, again, the perception versus the reality debate is one that we are not doing well in Australia at the moment. And I think it is an absolute shame that the rhetoric that keeps coming out keeps pushing down, I guess, some of the quality attributes of our sector.
This is a really good piece, mate. I'm going to put the link in the podcast description if you want to read it. And I was just as you were chatting there, I was just jumping on the Koala News just to grab the URL, just put it into my little notes. I love what you've done with the rollovers on the articles. So if someone hasn't actually been on the Koala News recently, like the rollovers, when you scroll over the articles and the image changes, that's beautiful, mate. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thanks, mate. I wish I could say I designed it. It's a lovely little piece that you can just drop in there and it does it of its own accord. But I did come across it and thought it looked pretty good. So
it looks super nice. Like yeah, I mean, I've said this on the pod before. Like I consume most of the Koala stuff via LinkedIn because I spend more time on LinkedIn or reading the digest at the end of the week, which is obviously great. Yeah, this is looking super nice. The site's in super good shape. Good on you. Love
thanks,
it. So there you go, listeners. If you haven't actually been on the platform lately, make sure you jump on there and check it out, because it's looking super nice. We've sort of been talking about policy and perception and everything like that. So why don't we move on to the response to the international ed inquiry? It kind of seems to follow on kind of nicely, although probably want to put our heads through the wall.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the government released its response to. So, if you remember, there was an inquiry led by the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee from memory, and it began in October of 2022, and it was an inquiry into international education and tourism. I've been probably, to be fair, I've probably been fairly critical about the approach. The way my view was, this is great. We've finally got a review of international education and tourism. And this is a great opportunity to start looking at some of the, I guess, attributes that overlap between the two and how we can leverage those. Silly old me, because that wasn't even touched or looked at. The government clearly split off international education and tourism into two, I would argue, separate reviews. There's certainly two documents that came out separately. Again, the inquiry began in October of 2022. The interim report from the committee was handed down in October 2023. I'll just repeat that, and the government has just responded in March of 2026. So, again, I would say that, with all the reforms that are going on or have been going on since this has been going on, to me, this just seems to be a little bit like, oh, look, we've done all this already kind of approach. Yeah. And just the time in which I feel like the process is just wrong, right? If you've got a report that you're wanting to look at what's good, what's best, how do we make this better? You get a report, you respond to it, and then you go off and you go and do these things. These are the things that need to happen. When the response comes after,
years later,
possibly up to 10 major, policy reviews and policy changes, for me, it's a little bit hard to swallow, to be fair. And again, the government would say, well, that's our prerogative and that's fine. Then you start talking about, well, what's the consultation around that? And, we know that there hasn't been much and that there's a lot of members of the sector that feel probably hardly done by because of that lack of consultation. But yeah, it just seems a bit weird, mate. I've got to say, just it's hard.
Any key bit that really,
yeah. So I mean, the bit I was going to say that the bit that gets me was if you go. So I always like looking at these things through the original terms of reference because the terms of reference sets out what are we actually going to explore and what's the deal. So the original terms of reference probably asked for something a bit more ambitious than what we saw as a compliance exercise in the end. The terms of reference asked for how the sector could recover out of COVID, grow, innovate, and strengthen its global position post-COVID. So if you think about what's gone on in the past and compare that to the terms of reference,
that's funny, Dirk. That doesn't sound like the message that we've been hearing for the last couple of years, does it? What were those like? Sorry, it was recover from COVID, improve global standing. What were some of the other ones there? That was no, that doesn't sound consistent at all with
around innovation. So recover, grow, innovate, and strengthen. Yeah. So they all sound like very, very positive terms as opposed to managed, declined, fewer, and those kind of expressive words either. So it's an interesting one anyway, mate. And look, we know where we're at with this government, and unfortunately, it's we're not seeing the full kind of card deck being played, which is unfortunate. So, but we move on and we do the best that we can.
What I'd be fascinated to know, Dirk, is behind closed doors, what do people in government actually really think? Like, I understand there's the kind of political rhetoric around immigration, and look, we've definitely got problems with housing and everything like that, as we know, not necessarily linked to international education, international students, but there we are. But the economic impact is unequivocal. The role of universities in primary research, in educating our population, these are positive, amazing things. I just want to, behind closed doors, if that's kind of literally part of the conversation. Oh yeah, this is what we actually think, but this is kind of what we have to do. I'd just love to be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations.
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever find out.
No.
I think bureaucrats are bureaucrats for a reason, and they hold that stuff very close to them. Yeah.
I'll end on something. But actually, not end, because we're moving on to talk with Nico from Sinorbis in just a moment. But something nice coming out of Victoria.
Yeah, mate, it's really nice to see stories like this. So the AFL is combining with Study Melbourne to support international students, which is just lovely. So up to 200 international students will have the opportunity to learn and to play AFL and attend live matches as part of a Victorian government program helping, I guess, engaging international students into the community, which is fantastic. And the AFL is one of 14 organisations to receive a grant under the Study Melbourne Inclusion Program for 2026. So congratulations to Study Melbourne and to the AFL for really, I guess, coming on board and being able to, I guess, being a major cultural organisation, albeit sporting focused. But, the AFL is well known for, I guess, probably being a little bit more culturally aware than possibly other national sporting organisations. And it's great to see that they're taking interest in this space.
So clever, in my view. If you want to build brand, you want to build loyalty, you want to build connection, doing it around something like sport and something which is as parochial as the AFL is in Victoria makes absolute sense. The digital marketer to me is just like, that's awesome. The community
Mate,
manager part of me is just
I
like,
agree.
you guys are
I
crushing it.
agree.
What a great idea.
And not to compound that parochialism, but I really hope that's extended to the mighty Fremantle Dockers, mate.
Very good. I'm not going to wade into that debate.
Rob, shall we bring in our guest?
Let's do it, Dirk. Our guest today is Nico Chu from Sinorbis. Nico, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Super good to have you. And mate, before we start to jump into the work stuff, mate, just tell us a little bit about your journey into international ed. How do you end up where you are now?
Sure. I've always had a foot in two worlds, really. I spent years, leading some of the largest tech companies in the world, companies like Expedia and Orbit. So I know how digital platforms work and how businesses connect with people online. But I've been also, so let me rephrase it, sorry. But I have also always been drawn to academia, first back in Europe and now here in Australia, where I am a professor of practice in marketing at the UNSW Business School. And that side keeps me plugged into the latest thinking on how organizations engage and grow. So what happened is that through both of those lenses, I kept seeing the same problem. Organizations, institutions, big and small, really struggle to reach and engage audiences that are overseas. And the tools were all over the place. The expertise was really hard to find. And the barriers were just too high, especially in markets like in China, where almost everything is different from what we have here in Australia, right? So to me, eventually I thought someone needs to fix it. And this is how I came with the idea of Sinorbis. So the idea was quite simple: build an all-in-one platform that will take all.
This is the part that systematically one of us will stop up. Let's do it.
Rob, shall we bring in our guest?
Let's do it, Dirk. Our guest today is Nico Chu from Sinorbis. Nico, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Super good to have you. And mate, before we start to jump into the work stuff, mate, just tell us a little bit about your journey into international ed. How do you end up where you are now?
Sure. I've always had a foot in two worlds, really. I spent years leading some of the largest tech companies in the world, companies like Expedia and Orbit. So I know how digital platforms work and how businesses connect with people online. But I've been also, so let me rephrase it, sorry. But I have also always been drawn to academia, first back in Europe and now here in Australia, where I am a professor of practice in marketing at the UNSW Business School. And that side keeps me plugged into the latest thinking on how organizations engage and grow. So what happened is that through both of those lenses, I kept seeing the same problem. Organizations, institutions, big and small, really struggle to reach and engage audiences that are overseas. And the tools were all over the place. The expertise was really hard to find. And the barriers were just too high, especially in markets like in China, where almost everything is different from what we have here in Australia, right? To me, eventually I thought someone needs to fix it. And this is how I came with the idea of Sinorbis. So the idea was quite simple: build an all-in-one platform that will take all that complexity and make it manageable. So any organization, no matter actually the size, can actually do it, from wherever they are. And having a very good understanding of international education, I decided to combine both and really focus on higher education for this platform.
It's a really good point. And you mentioned, obviously, starting Sinorbis. It's a pretty popular name, or a pretty well-known name in the sector these days. Pull back the curtain for us, and just how did you go about that? I mean, without sounding silly, we have guests on, and I think one of the beauties of this podcast is people get to see behind the curtain a little bit. So
Yes.
tell us about, where do you start with something like that? Making the complex simple. How does that work?
Yeah, well, so I was hiking in the Blue Mountains in next to Sydney, actually, when I came with the idea.
Beautiful part of the world, that.
Beautiful part of the world, one of my favorites. So
It's where I
sorry, that's where you're
where
coming
I-
from?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, which part?
So just at the foot of the mountains at Penrith.
Oh, Penrith, yeah.
Yeah, I'm up and down to Springwood, or kind of Wentworth Falls all the time.
Very nice. I'm actually doing a triathlon in 2 weeks in Penrith.
Oh,
You're doing
fantastic!
the Penrith
There you
Try.
go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, or the Western Sydney half Ironman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, Dirk, once we had the problem clearly defined, that is, how can we make it this easy? The next question was where to start. And to me, the answer was obvious. I wanted to start, and it sounds a little bit funny, but I wanted to start where it is the hardest, start where no one else is. And that was China. And it is, the reason was it was, and it is still the largest source market, for higher education, and not just in Australia, but globally. But also it is and has been really the most difficult one, because the digital ecosystem and the regulations are completely different from what we have in the West. So it was a natural fit for me personally, having spent years building deep expertise in this market, to do it. And our bet was simple: if we were able to help institutions to reach and engage prospective students in China, we would be able to support their recruitments everywhere. And also the benefit was that no one else was offering it. So the idea, it sounds a little bit crazy to go after the most difficult market, but the benefit was that we had, very limited competition. And that's the reason why we did it. But then when I launched Sinorbis, I realized why no one else was doing it.
Isn't that a wonderful moment as an entrepreneur, where suddenly you're like, I've got this great idea, the market's wide open, and then you open the cover and you're like, oh crap, this is real hard.
Yeah, 100%. So on paper, it was a brilliant idea. It's like it was a blue ocean, and then I realized why it was a blue ocean. but that's what we did, and we did it for a few years, and we went deep on China, and it worked. And even during COVID, when everyone else was pulling back, we actually grew exponentially. We expanded beyond Australia. We started to service institutions in the UK, in the US, and Canada. And from there, we began broadening our coverage across the rest of Asia. And that's what we started to do 2 to 3 years ago. But the bigger picture was always the same. It was, for me, the ultimate goal was that, we shouldn't just be doing China. We should be helping and build a single platform to help institutions engage with their audience wherever they are in the world. China was the proving ground, and now we are able to deliver on the broader vision, which is quite exciting. So that's a little bit the story behind Sinorbis.
What's your take? Can I just get your take on, like, the last 12 to 24 months here in Australian international ed has just been, I know, Dirk, kind of crazy, hasn't it? Like, up and down. What's your take on what's been going on here in Australia?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you zoom out, a lot has happened over the past 5 years, not just the 12 to 24 months, right? So COVID, political tensions, visa restrictions, financial difficulties hitting, certain institutions, declining student demand from some traditional sources countries. It has been a wave of disruption. But if we focus on the past 12 to 24 months specifically, what really stands out to me is how international student recruitment has changed. We have moved from, quite a competitive environment to a much more competitive environment, and I don't think that we're going to go anywhere back to what it used to be. International recruitment used to be really defined by a small group of dominant destinations, Australia. I'm including New Zealand here as well, but the UK, obviously, the US and Canada. And these were the places everyone wanted to go. And this has changed for many reasons. I think since COVID, a lot of students realized that it was quite important to not be that far from home. And if we are thinking of prospective students from China, I think Asia has been definitely the place to go. But also because of all those visa restrictions, all the noise that happened, there has been a shift of demand to different destinations. In Europe, we have started to see an increase of demand for countries like in France or Germany, Italy, actually. As a matter of fact, we have been starting now to work with quite a few institutions in Italy over the past 3 years, and it was not the case, 10 years ago. So what that means for institutions is that the old playbook does not work anymore. You cannot just open your doors and expect students to come. It is extremely competitive. I think that the financial power as well has declined, meaning that it was quite common for families in Asia, in China or in India to take literally like to borrow money to send their kids overseas. Employability has, been really now on top of the list, mainly because of the unemployment rate in both countries. So it is not just, we're going to take a loan, send our kids overseas to have good education. We want to have some kind of return on investment and making sure that actually, they would be able to find a job as well. So what it means for institutions is that you have to actively go out there, tell your story, differentiate yourself, and engage with prospective students in the channels, and markets where they are. And I think in Australia, institutions have always been a bit more sophisticated from a marketing and recruitment perspective at the international level. And so we have been doing that for quite some time, but there are now institutions in the US where they never had to do anything. And, they were just surfing on the aura that the US has had in terms of international education. And it's not the case anymore. They really need and have to work hard. And we have seen this, across the world. So there's no, like, I open the gates and students are, coming and the flow, especially from markets like in China. So a lot of people are saying, it's declining. Well, it is actually, it's not that much that it is declining. It is that it is much, much more competitive now, and you need to fight for those students.
Really interesting perspective, and particularly looking back over COVID. If I put you on the spot and say what's happening right now, and I cache this in the point that I saw some recent research that you did with Edified around student engagement and communication. What were some of the key findings of that, and where do you see that kind of going?
Yeah. Thanks. It's a good question, and we're very proud of this piece of research that we did with Edified. So first, I would say speed really matters. That's if there's only one takeaway from this piece of research, is really speed. Speed is super important. Around 70% of students expect a reply within a couple of days, and 2/3 say that the speed to response actually influence, which university they choose. And I can confirm, because actually my daughter is currently applying to quite a few universities. She wants to study architecture. And it's quite an interesting experience because I'm on the other side and I can actually experience how good some unis are. So this is the first part. Speed is super important. The second thing is that students now expect communication to feel like messaging. They are used to platforms like WhatsApp, Snapchat, WeChat in China, Line in Japan. And on those platforms, conversations flow naturally over time. It's not the case with email. So they expect that same experience with universities, like a continuous thread instead of having, disjointed emails. That would be the second one. The third one, and I think it's quite a big point, is that communication issues directly lead to lost application. And when a student knows which university, if they has like the primary choice, that's fine. But most of the time, they actually consider up to 5 different universities. And if the primary doesn't work, which is, by the way, might be the case for my daughter because she didn't apply on time for the main university that she wanted to do, then she will be looking at 4 other universities. And part of this research, we noticed that about a third of students said that they will abandon their application because of poor communication.
Yeah.
So it's not just frustration; it is actually an actual loss in conversion. It's also worth remembering, as I mentioned, that the choice has reduced, and 94% said that they will maximum compare 5 universities. So when this list is that tight, even small differences in the experience will make a big difference in terms of conversion. And finally, I think, and this is a major theme, fragmented communication really erodes trust. I said that in the past, and it was confirmed through this research. Nearly 70% of students report that moderate to extreme frustration when they engage with universities. 83% had to repeat themselves. 43% receive conflicting information. So imagine that you go and buy a pair of jeans somewhere, and you keep receiving conflicting information from people from the store. I mean, obviously, it's quite a different purchase in this particular case. So you can imagine that it doesn't give a lot of trust. And I think this is one of the major key takeaway from this piece of research.
You know what, Nick, as you're talking, I'm sort of thinking about Generation GPT. The next generation that's coming through, the 13-year-olds plus or and down, they're going to be native to this brand new technology that really creates a very different experience. Now, obviously, that they're still coming through the pipeline, but the world's going to change a lot in the next few years. But what does that experience look like now? Like, what's a good student experience in terms of the recruitment look like right now, without thinking too far and down the next 5-6 years?
It is one that is addressing the points that I just mentioned. It's an experience where they get answers quickly, when it doesn't feel disjointed and fragmented, where actually they do not receive conflicting information. When they talk to someone new, this person is aware of the previous conversation. Actually, you mentioned with this research that we did with Edified, and they were, and that was not part of this research, but they did share with me that as part of their mystery tracker, they interviewed the students in India that actually has had 19 interactions, with different people from the first touch point to the last one. 19 people. Can you imagine how? So I think what good means getting information on time, being reassured when it's relevant, being on the channel that they are. I'm keep saying the same thing. If I want to get an answer from my daughters, I'm not going to send them an email. I will communicate on the channel that they are, even though if it's quite frustrating for me, but I do that and I'll get an answer, and that's not that dissimilar, right? So at the end of the day, you want to talk to someone in China, don't send them an email, send them a WeChat. WhatsApp would be the same for the rest of the world, Line for in Japan or Taiwan, Zalo in Vietnam, Kakao Talk in South Korea. So it's also, I think, to get this engagement ongoing, and whatever we like it or not, this generation is I call it the instant generation. They grew up with instant messaging, with streaming for movie or music. It's not like when I was a kid, when I had to wait on the free to air to watch my TV show or to put my VHS, right? So this is, they are used to on-demand consumption, and so it shouldn't come as a huge surprise that their expectations are shaped on how they act with digital platforms. So I think there's also a perception of slow communication that needs to be addressed. Whatever we like it or not, they are expecting to have this ongoing and seamless engagement, with institutions. So that's what it would mean. I mean, what good would mean for me.
Can I turn left slightly quickly? Are you proposing that there's people in a call center somewhere that's actually doing this, or would you say over time that this is a role for AI or an AI bot that can actually engage in this way, some of the things that you talked about earlier about that 19 interactions, about having someone be aware of the previous conversation, to me that sounds like something a bot could do possibly better than what a human ever could, just from the pure point of view of being able to recant the previous questions and ensuring there's not replication in that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Rob and I often talk about AI on this pod, and one of the things that, we're talking about avatars and the way that all presents and just how quickly that technology is moving. And yeah, so anyway, I'd be interested in your perspective on that one.
Yeah, so definitely, I think it could be addressed by AI. I will expand my answer by saying it is definitely addressable through technology in general. It doesn't have to be through AI, through the right systems. There is indeed a real issue with the limited resources and constraints of resources and time that the institutions have. And it's quite often that inquiry management teams are quite limited, and they would be limited to certain language and certain market because they can't have one person for every single market to be on every single channels out there. And this is understandable, but technology can address and can help you. You can actually centralize all this. You can connect it with your CRM. You can be on the right channels. I mean, obviously, a shameless plug. You can use a platform such as Sinorbis to actually connect with those channels and automate your workflows. So absolutely, I think technology can address these issues. AI is just another layer. The way how I see it is there are several steps to get things right. The first one is just be on the channels that your audience is. If they're on WhatsApp, you should definitely be on WhatsApp. If they're on WeChat, you should be on WeChat. The second one, and it sounds weird and obvious in some ways, but you should own those channels.
Yes.
Because it's not always the case, right?
True.
And especially with those messaging. I mean, we're lucky enough to work with more than 130 institutions from all around the world now. And sometimes when we talk to a new institution and say, yeah, we're on WhatsApp, and when we start to delve into the details, it's a rep on the ground or it's an agent on the ground that is using their own personal WhatsApp account to do it. Is that, well,
yeah, wow.
That risk is insane, isn't it? That you've just got and it could be a representative, but if they've got that handle and they're building the reputation on their account, that is so dangerous.
It is, Rob. It is exactly what happened to an institution in Malaysia. They had an institution that had 2 reps in Malaysia, and they were using WhatsApp, and one left, and they lost 50% of their base. And obviously, they had a very good relationship with their reps. But the problem is that this rep was using an individual account, so it was his account. So the second thing is that you should own your account. I don't think you would be giving access or your Facebook page to someone else. So why are you okay to have someone else, managing things on those channels? So that would be really the second thing that is important. But once you are on those channels, then you can use technology to automate, create workflows, streamline the engagement, recording or having access to the history of conversation and linking this to CRM. But to your point, Dirk, we now have access to a technology that allows you to do that at scale. You can even do more. So for me, it's more it's an amplification of what we already have through technology. Technology allows you to handle that, but now you can do that at scale. We are, as we discussed, building AI agents for some, I can't mention them yet, but some institutions to actually be able to address inquiries in any language on any channel. And this is a multiplier from they have an inquiry team of 5 guys, and now they will be able to actually answer inquiry in simplified Chinese from China, or in Japanese, from Japan online on the right channels. That's the idea. So this was not possible before, because even if you had automation, it was still a very specific patterns to follow. Now it allows to have proper conversation. Obviously, you have some constraints, and you need to be careful of a lot of things, including data privacy, including hallucination and all this. But there are ways how you can limit these things and you can control. So yes, I think AI is helping to address it, but it's just another layer.
Yeah, kind of speak like the hallucination stuff. I honestly think this is a problem that's just about disappeared in my views, like it's disappearing at a rapid rate with the technology we're playing with. Like hallucination rates are now just going down through the floor. So I think people are still hesitant about embracing that sort of technology or implementing it, as you say, as an additional tool into other kind of workflows. I think that's smart. I think there's risk in just adopting something which isn't connected to other things, apps. But yeah, I feel like the technology is just moving so quickly right now, and
You're
improving
right,
at a
Robin.
rate of knots.
Yeah, you're right. And it's also because people are referring to GPT, which has no guardrails, which is actually searching the web and giving you. And
Yeah, it
it's
just comes from
like
Reddit, right? Like it's just whatever some chump said on Reddit about this uni was
100%.
my crap experience was crap, and that gets picked up in the training. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily helpful. So yeah,
Yeah, I had a personal experience recently with GPT where I was looking, well, that's a private note, but I was looking for the perfect ratio of electrolyte when you do endurance training,
that's
and I found it, and I wanted to find the right drink to do it, and everything that was recommended by GPT were American brands. I said you must have Australian brands, and there was an Australian brand, and I
Infinite.
look at the Australian.
Did you find it? Infinite.
I don't know if I can say the name of a brand
You can if you
on the
want. Go for
podcast.
it.
It's a Sodi
Okay. Oh yeah,
actually, and
Sony's brilliant. Yeah. So
yeah,
sorry. Now
and
we're into ultra endurance stuff. So listeners, bear with me while Nico and I just geek out for a second about electrolytes.
exactly. And to be completely fair, the American brands is LMNT.
Yeah.
So I was actually comparing exactly the same ratio, like exactly in terms of sodium, in terms of magnesium. And then I was asking, the AI, okay, so which one would be the best? And they would keep pushing for the American brand. And I said, but hold on, it's exactly the same ratio. And they said, yeah, but when you put one in 500 milliliters, which is the recommendation, and the other one on 700, then obviously you have one that is more, for endurance. And I said, yeah, but what about if I put the second one in 500 milliliters? And he said, oh, you're right, it's exactly the same thing. What the model was doing is just actually from a probability perspective, looking at marketing collaterals from the first brand and keep pushing the first brand, what actually it did was exactly the same ratio for both brands. And so when people are seeing that, it doesn't give them a lot of trust, saying, I'm not going to give access or ask GPT to answer questions for my institutions. But there's a big distinction between what you have access, for the public and what you can do with the model. So for instance, what we are doing for those institutions is actually specific models that are trained on their data. There's no hallucination, there's no option to actually find, if there's no answers on the data that are provided that we are training the model on to answer the inquiry from the students, then they can't come with actually, things that the probability would be high, but still incorrect. So that's to your point. You're right. The hallucination is actually linked to when there's no guardrails and
Exactly.
when the model
Yeah.
is not specifically limited to a certain source of data.
Yeah, and we've been playing around in this technology too. It's just about building good guardrails. And if you're just on ChatGPT or Claude or any of these, and you don't actually include those in your inquiries, you end up with a higher error rate. So, yeah, I just want to encourage people to think broadly about that stuff because, yeah, it's just about good design, like so many things in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe we keep this, maybe we don't. But the other brands, I do a fair bit of endurance stuff. But Infinite, made in
Infinite?
Australia, Infinite with no
Okay.
E on the end, made on the
Okay.
Sunshine Coast, allows you to
Oh.
customize your blend of proteins, electrolytes, carbs, the whole lot. Freaking amazing. They've got
Wow.
a product called Go Far. And so
Yeah.
I've done ultras, and honestly,
Yeah.
I don't eat anything when I run an ultra now. I just
Yeah.
use Infinite powder. It's freaking amazing. Highly
Is that
recommend
right?
it. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. And not that
Taking a note.
expensive for what you get. It's unbelievable stuff. Like it's just, I mean, everyone's body's different, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I like. I like the idea of being able
you
to build it.
customize.
So
You can put more carb. You can put caffeine in it. The whole
infinite. Okay.
infinite on the Sunshine
Wow.
Coast. If you search for
On the
Infinite
Sunshine
Sunshine
Coast.
Coast, you'll find it. They're freaking
Nice.
amazing.
Awesome.
Feel like a bit of a spectator at the moment, so let me participate.
Yeah,
I
maybe
was always,
Dirk, you can
I was
participate.
always a tailwinds kind of guy.
Sorry, Dirk?
I was always a tailwinds kind of guy.
a tailwind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll bomb out on that. I'll let you guys keep going.
Over to you, Dirk.
Over to me. All right, getting back to what we're actually talking about, what other are there any other opportunities, or more to the point, as you look forward over the next couple of years, what do you see as the major opportunities for institutions as they're engaging students?
Oh, it's institutions by definition, and rightly because of the whole structure, can be quite conservative in the adoption of technology or trying new things. I think that there's an opportunity to change that and I wouldn't say you have to embrace the technology for the sake of embracing it, but when you are in a world where it's much more competitive, where you have constraints of resources, financial resources, human resources, when there's more, more demand, not more demand, but when the demand is more specific from your audience, technology can address all this if you do it properly. So I see this as an opportunity for institutions, the one that will take bold moves that will actually leverage those technology to address all of those constraints and issues. I always say you don't control your environment. The only thing that you control is how you react to your environment. So we will be facing, headwinds. We're talking about tailwinds, but we would be facing headwinds still. Some countries more than others. Canada right now is facing a lot of headwinds. Australia is doing fairly well. The US, as we know, is facing a lot of headwinds right now. We are seeing institutions navigating this very well by leveraging the right tools, technology, trying to be innovative, doing things differently. Well, I think we are very fortunate in this part of the world where we probably have the most forward-thinking institutions in terms of recruitment in Australia and New Zealand, and there's no surprises. And again, it's not because I'm in Australia and you guys are in Australia, but it's true. We work with institutions from all around the world. The always early adopters and trying new things and try and be very sophisticated in their approach are always coming from this part of the world. So I think there's definitely the opportunities will be to leverage what's happening. It's actually, for the first time, we do have technology that will allow you to do it at scale, and this was not the case before. And if you are addressing this very fragmented journey that is the student recruitment journey by providing a seamless experience through technology, you will have a head start. And to me, that's a real opportunity because it's a natural problem. It's a real problem. And by the way, it's a global problem. I was in the UK 2 weeks ago and I was we did an event with 20 of our clients there, institutions from different sizes, regional universities up to the Russell Group. And it was a common problem. They all recognize how disjointed the recruiting journey, has been for students. So the opportunity is really addressing this fragmentation through technology. Yeah.
I'm feeling the time's running out. We've been talking for quite some time. It's been a great conversation. But before we tie things up, what are you guys working on over the next little bit? And have you got any big announcements that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so we are actually working on a lot of different things. But it is true that going back to what I was describing, we really understood by working with a lot of institutions that this was a major problem. And going back to this fragmentation and like that the fact that it is that the whole journey is extremely fragmented when you consider that students are across dozens of platforms and channels, many different local messaging platforms like WeChat or WhatsApp. And most universities do not have the means to address all this. So we realized that our platform and our technology could address it. So we have been, for the past 6 to 12 months, focusing on putting all this together to really build a platform to allow institutions to transform this highly fragmented journey between the student and the institutions, between students, agents, students, partners, institutions, another layer through the communication channels, another layer depending on the market where you have restrictions such as in China, to make it very streamlined and having just one centralized platform where you can engage with your students, whatever it is, at the top of the funnel through conversion and enrollment.
Nice.
And so that's what we have been building. We have this very big, bold goal that we would love to be this unique platform that will be the engagement layer for institutions to address this problem. We're not trying to replace CRMs or marketing automation, but we are plugging on top of their legacy systems to allow them to address it. And for some of them to add another layer through AI. So yes, there are a lot that's happening, and over the next, I think my technology team was telling me recently that we are releasing five features per month right now on the platform. So a lot is happening.
And are these, I mean, obviously that you're kind of working in an agile environment there, but are these things that are just rolling off, or do you have a big kind of go-to-market day where, you know, you're going to have a bunch of these things roll out? And if that is the case, where's the best place for listeners to actually learn about that?
Oh, it's a great question. I wish we had like a proper go-to-market. I think it's yeah, but the reason why we are actually not, we do communicate on it, and obviously if you go on Sinorbis.com, you will have all the information on a regular basis. If you subscribe to our different channels, whatever it is, email, WhatsApp, WeChat, you will get this information as well. But also I made the decision last year to continuously be adding things to our platform, but not to change the price and the plan. So it's not as if we are releasing new features and we're trying to sell those features. The reason why, you know, we decided to do that is because we generally believe that as a software as a service, we need to continuously provide value. Yeah. And we're obsessed about it. And it to me, it's more a question of survival. If you were, you know, offering a certain set of features 2 years ago, they might not be relevant.
You're right.
So if you charge, let's say $500 per month to do that 2 years ago, if you still offer the same thing for $500 today, that's the reason why a lot of software services are going down, without naming them. Because when you look at all those big SaaS, they offer a lot of features, but you always have to pay more. So we took like a different direction, and it started 2 years ago. We said that we'll be adding a lot of things to our plans, and we'll keep the price the same. And this is probably the reason why we're lucky enough to have been working with the same institutions for so many years, because we keep provide things. And it's not just technology. We came with this idea of tokens for services. One thing that we realized is that we have some expertise in certain fields. One of them is China marketing, and we're quite often asked to help in different aspects. And what we decided is actually, why not including as part of your plan a series of tokens that you can use and consume for any services that we could provide. And obviously this was a huge success, because yes, institutions do need support, you know, besides the technology. And we added this at no extra cost. Again, because I think nowadays you have to be obsessed with the value that you're providing. Otherwise you take the risk to become irrelevant. So that's what we have been doing, and there's no actual go-to-market where we say, oh, now we have this new feature, you have to pay for it. Usually we to our customers, we actually communicate on the new things that they have access through the existing plan.
That's awesome, mate. Well done. It sounds like you're going to be very relevant for a very long period of time.
Well, we're trying to, at least. So we have been there for 10 years, which is not bad. So yes, that's the idea.
Nico, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. Our guest has been Nico Chu, the CEO of Sinorbis. Obviously, you just mentioned the Sinorbis website. Where else can we find you, mate, if we need to look you up and engage?
On LinkedIn. We share a lot of information on LinkedIn. We are speaking at a lot of conferences like you guys. I see often the booth at AIC and so forth. So we're always at the main international conferences as well. You can definitely contact me on my email address. I have no issue with that. Happy to share it online. It's nico@sinorbis.com. Always, it's a field that I'm very passionate about. So it's quite often that I'm, outreached by people just to ask questions. I'm happy to answer those. And sometimes I have also my academic hat as well from UNSW. So I'm more than happy to, if I can, answer any questions, people have.
Great to chat with you, mate. And for everyone listening along, of course, your source of Australian international education news truth is the Koala News. hopefully by now every single listener has already subscribed to the mailing list. Dirk, I'm going to be doing our regular 2-weekly update. Are we at 10,000 yet on LinkedIn? 10,000 followers?
Mate, almost a little bit over 400 to go.
Come on, people!
We're getting closer. We're getting closer.
Getting closer.
Nice.
I'm going to be talking it up every time we're recording a podcast till we get to the 10,000. Amazing. And of course,
we should be pushing it on the Sinorbis newsletters for you guys to reach the 10,000.
Please do. We want to get Dirk to 10,000 for the Koala News. Excellent. Thanks for everything you do, of course, Dirk, with the Koala News, and for joining me again on the pod. See you all next time.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Global Horizons podcast, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Search for Global Horizons podcast and then just pop in your email address, and that way you will never miss out on all of the critical international education news that you need to stay up to date with. This episode has been produced on Garigal land in Sydney. Our video and audio editor is Len Zamora, and I'm your host, Rob Malicki. Have an awesome day. See you in the next episode.